guys. Welcome back to the other side where we talk about trials, triumphs, and everything in between. Today, I am so excited because I have a friend, believe it or not, that I met during COVID. We had nothing to do, nowhere to go. We're looking for empowerment groups, and somebody put one together, and we met, and our paths have crossed multiple times now. And we're just wonderful friends. And I just saw her again. She's written a wonderful children's book that touches on emotional intelligence for children, Abuelita's Heart Wisdom. Please help me in welcoming Lucy Cibrian Ibarra.
Thanks. Thanks, Linda, for having me.
You're welcome. I had to look back at it because the Cibrian, it's kind of new.
Yes.
We had a little conversation before it started, and I did want to touch on that a little bit. It's new because it's, as you mentioned, your maiden name.
Yes.
And for some reason, you felt like you needed to pull that back into your life, right?
Yes. Yes.
What brought that on?
So, you and I met through a mastermind group
Mhm.
where it was a couple of people in the real estate industry, and I've been a lender for 21 years now.
Yes.
Prior to meeting I was already in the business prior to meeting my husband. So I was Lucy Cibrian in the lending world
Mm.
when we met, right?
Yeah.
But obviously picked up on his name. I'm so honored to be an extension of his name, but losing the maiden name somewhere along the line,
Mhm.
it was an okay thing. Now I'm in this position of I want to honor my lineage. I want to honor who I am outside of having become a wife.
Mhm.
And just honoring my ancestors by keeping that last name on there was a big deal to me. So that's the reason for it. I'm obviously super comfortable with where I'm at in life with my marriage,
Yes.
but also within myself.
Yes. And being that this what the book is all about, right? The lineage and honoring ourselves and our emotions.
Yes.
It I like that you did add it and you're now an author, It's so cool. I had this great opening, you guys, how I was going to introduce her and I lost it all. But she is a lender, she's a mother, she's a grandmother, she is now an author.
Yes.
To add that to your title is so exciting. You recently became a wife again, right? Not too long ago. I mean, still kind of in the newlywed phase, I would say, which is awesome. This would be your second marriage, right?
Yes. So it's my second marriage. We just celebrated our 17-year wedding anniversary, which is what you saw on Instagram.
Oh my.
We renewed our wedding vows.
Oh
Yes.
wow.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So you were married when we met
I
then
was
to
married when we
him
met.
already.
Yes.
Okay. God, you know what? It's kind of crazy because every time we meet, I think I find out a new story, right, about your life. And the first time we met was at a build.
Mhm.
I also want to mention Lucy is a philanthropist, and we did meet on a build
Yes.
for Prosperity Homes. I have to give them a shout out because I mean, what they do and what you guys do all the time. You just got back, as a
Did.
matter of fact, from a build. And, we go to Mexico, you guys, and build a home. We get there on Friday and leave them with a home on Monday. And
Yes.
I mean, to do that work, and which is so cute because I did notice on one of the illustrations in the book, it talks about giving back and honoring that. And there's a picture. All the little houses are purple. But you just did Is there another color? No, we're still doing purple, right?
We're doing purple. There's a couple of blue ones that snuck in there
Yeah.
somewhere, but we're still doing purple. That's our color for Prosperity Homes. So,
Yes. So, when we met the first time, you did touch on your sister.
mhm.
You had a death in the family, which was pretty tragic,
Yes.
right? And I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but I did want to touch on it because, as I mentioned earlier, I know it tied into the emotional intelligence that you wanted to share with the children in this book.
Right.
Being able to process all those emotions that as adults, sometimes we don't know how to process
Right.
because, if we were young when a death happened, we were too young to really understand the validity of what happened. And then we become the adult and we not only have to process our emotions, right? We have to help our young ones and
Right.
our children also process these same emotions. So, if you want to touch on that a little.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I'm very, very blessed. I think for many years I lived in a victim mode, victim mentality of the circumstances that life brought my way, as far as, my divorce, being a single mom, at 26, losing my sister 2 years later, along with their kids, a lot of things that I had not processed and stayed in victim mentality, right? Then losing my mom, losing my dad, all of it together. Um, when I went through my divorce, and I was just sharing this with somebody,
Yeah.
I felt like it was the most difficult thing that I had gone through in my life at that moment,
It's
right?
so crazy.
Yes,
It feels like a death.
it does. It is a death. You
Yeah.
are
Yes.
mourning a loss of sorts, right?
Which
And
sometimes a death can be easier because it's just done.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
little finality to it.
you have closure with losing that
Hmm.
person. In this situation, it was a little bit different because I was raising two young kids, and and you get married thinking it's forever, that sort of
Hmm.
deal. But at that time, it was really difficult. Um, to process, to kind of figure out how things were going to work out. But 2 years later, I lost my sister and her two children in a car accident. And at that moment, I realized, wow, that divorce was nothing
Hmm.
compared to the pain of going through that loss, telling my parents, having to tell my parents the news, watching them crumble.
Mm.
It just gave me a lot of perspective, that I needed to honor my life, or honor my sister's life, by living my life, by living
Yeah.
fully, and I still didn't know what that meant. I
Right.
didn't, I wasn't too certain what that was supposed to look like. Writing the book, there was this deep seated desire that I had to put the book out there. And that was probably, it's so funny because I kept saying I had it on my list, I had it on my vision board for 2 years.
I was just going to ask you how long.
Yeah. But actually, when I went back to look at the vision board that I had added it onto, it was 4 years prior. But
Mm.
you lose sense,
Yes,
you lose track
time.
of time, right?
Absolutely.
So there's these things that, I have been very, very blessed to work with amazing women who lovingly push me,
Mm.
who lovingly nudge me that, hey, you want to do this.
Well, but cheerleaders, right? We
Absolutely.
need these cheerleaders in our corner because
Absolutely.
the world is good at, patting
Yes.
us. You're too busy. You don't have enough time.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And one particular friend, my friend Annabelle, who told me, why haven't you put the book out there? You're talking about this. Why haven't you done it?
Mhm.
Same thing with the 17-year wedding anniversary. I was supposed to do it for our 20 years. And she said, you are,
I love it. I was like, you're still like a newlywed. It's so
yeah,
17
and we
years.
are, he's my best friend. I
I
love
love
him.
it.
He's amazing. He's just talking about cheerleaders. He's the
Yeah.
most amazing, right? He is my
And
wingman.
that's the way you talk about him. It is. So it really did seem really fresh. So that's even better. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So she, I had talked to her about renewing my wedding vows for 20 years. And she said, you more than anybody, you too, more than anybody, because he also lost a brother the same year,
Mm.
um, know how quickly things can happen and how plans can never come through
Oh,
because life strikes, right? And she said, why don't you do it for your next anniversary? And I was like, that's like a month away. Like, no, how would I do that?
yeah.
Sure enough, everything, I mean, just God started lining things up for us, with the venue that we did it at,
I
the
love
wedding
it.
dress, like everything. But again, kind of going back, I think that I really started, I want to say in the last year and a half, 2 years,
Mhm.
really started being intentional about how I live my life
Yeah.
and doing things with integrity and in conviction. Like,
And following your instincts,
yes,
like not stalling anymore, no more procrastinating.
yes, yes. Like
Yeah.
I turned 50 in January,
Mm.
and
Something about that age, huh?
I know. It's like it's so funny. I shared at another event that I spoke at how I heard Oprah say something like life doesn't start at 40, and I was so much younger, and I remember thinking 40 like, and now that I'm
Yes.
50, I just think like wow, the wisdom that we
Yes.
have at this age, right? We're
Yes.
great. And uh obviously why I named it Abuelita's heart wisdom,
Mm.
because it's like there are so many things that we go through in life And if we stay in that victim mode and that victim mentality, we're missing out. We're
Yeah.
missing out on our
Yep.
biggest adventures and answering the call to life.
And I love how it heart wisdom, right? Because we can be wise. I mean, people say it all the time, book smart, street smart. You can be book smart, you can be street smart, but are you heart smart? That's a
Absolutely.
totally different type of smart because
Absolutely.
you come with such a different intention
Right.
and
Right.
from such a different place,
Right. Which, we were
which is the real wisdom.
right. We were talking about how, the emotional intelligence aspect of
Mhm.
it. So it's been on my heart to put books out there, for children. So at a young age, they start understanding. There's obviously a page in there that talks about, it's my grandson sitting on my lap and he's
Mhm.
crying. I specifically, strategically did
Yeah.
that because men in our culture and other cultures as well are taught, you're a man, you don't cry.
Mhm.
We don't cry. We're men,
Mhm.
and what does that do to our men?
Yep. I'm going to read it to them because that's my favorite page. I told her, and it was interesting that it just happened to be page 11. I'm big on numbers, but it says, oh, it's the grandson. Tears are like rivers that help us to heal. They wash away sadness and help us feel real. It's okay to cry when the days feel so tough. Letting it out shows that you're strong and enough. And that we are enough.
Yes.
That's the hardest. It's
Right,
crazy.
right.
I
If
think and the biggest thing with people is they don't feel worthy. They
right,
don't feel enough.
right. I mean, if you think about what we feel as adults, a lot of it was conditioning from when we were kids or
Mhm.
traumas that we had when we were kids. And if we weren't taught to process them, that small little phrase and that
Yep.
that page might bring some insight to a parent, a grandparent that's reading the story to their
Mhm.
child, where they might be like, wow, this is something that triggers them
Yeah, because
to,
they were never told
yes, to
that
process
that
their
it's
own
okay to
emotions.
cry.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that was my intention when I started. I had mentioned to you that I'm getting ready to release the second book in a month or two here. And I really, really want to be intentional about the fact that, there's always going to be somebody in a generation, somebody in a lineage of families that
Mhm.
says enough. This is it. We're not going to continue to do this or do that.
Yep.
Um, for me, this was a big process because I feel, and I say this all the time, I had to process my emotions and
Mhm.
go through grief and really work through that. Um, but I say all the time that I found my sobriety through grief.
Yes.
I feel like when my mom passed away, everything was quiet. I never
Mhm.
got to really process my sister and her kids passing away, my dad passing away, my divorce, my
Mhm.
daughter and all my children leaving home for school and for the
Gosh, and that's
military.
so many different types of death. Like
All of them. A
like
lot of
yeah.
mourning, a lot of
Yes.
mourning.
Yes,
So I
yes.
didn't get to process it, and I think when I really sat with my grief and started to process that.
Well, you didn't have a choice, honey. You were all alone at that point.
Yes.
There
Right?
was nobody to distract
Right?
you.
That's what my
Yeah.
husband used to say, like, it was quiet,
Mhm.
like, you didn't have to take care of anybody anymore, like, you
Mhm.
just had to that was it, I had to sit with it. So, you know, alcohol became a self-medicating type
Mm.
situation for me, and, for a long time, you know I only my close friends really
Mhm.
it was a discussion with them, but I feel that us as women, when we speak our truth, it can help somebody else.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny because now that conversation's coming back to me too.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
we did have that
yes,
conversation.
yes,
I
and
just gosh, we've known each other for quite a long
right,
time now and different phases.
yes, yes, and I became sober in 2019, and when I say
That's right when
sobriety,
we met.
yeah, yeah, it
Mhm.
was right at that time when we had our women's mastermind. When I decided, I'm not gonna have any drinks anymore. Everything changed as far
Mhm.
as granted, people can go out and have a good time and do all
Mhm.
that. It just didn't work for me. It didn't
Mhm.
serve me. And my relationship with my daughter got stronger.
Oh,
She's my
beautiful.
biggest teacher, my 28-year-old. Shout out
Mhm.
to my daughter. She is my biggest teacher. Um, it's when we're willing to listen.
Yes.
That's what
I
the
feel like that with my son. It's
yeah,
it's amazing, and that's why I love your book so
yeah,
much. I really do because if we didn't have it when we were young, we could not teach our children.
no,
So the only time we can teach them is now, and they're not babies anymore, right? They're not young enough to sit on our lap, but it
right,
doesn't mean that we can't share what we've learned and still teach them in their 20s and their 30s
Yes.
and allow them, as you said, to teach us
Right.
and respect them enough to say, you're right. I was shitty. That did suck. I was wrong.
Right.
You know, but every day I'm trying to be better and I hope you see it and I'm doing it with the grandkids,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. I mean,
And that's how we can help heal.
right. Yeah. I mean, with her, I learned, thank God when I had the clarity, the mental clarity, I learned that when she said, "Mom, this and this happened," and that she told me for a long time she couldn't eat a certain food because I made her finish a plate full of it, and
Mommy dearest.
yeah, my mom did the same thing to me, but I remember thinking when she initially told me that story, thinking that never happened,
Yeah.
and or giving excuses and
Yeah.
defending the
Yeah.
situation. And I remember having the same conversation with my mom about something a bit different, but it was my truth, right? And my mom
Mhm.
saying that never happened. I would never, blah blah blah. It really reeled me back in to
Mm.
take responsibility for it without having to defend anything because that was her truth. I
Right.
needed to validate her. And
Yes.
as hard as it was for me to like, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I can't believe you showed up like that as a mom at some point in your life. Like, it's little things, right? It could be something like making her finish a full bowl
But you
of
know what
food.
people don't realize? Like,
Hmm.
look, man, we were moms in what, our 20s?
Yeah.
We are so stupid at that age. Like,
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at your kids. Like, can
Yeah.
you imagine them raising children?
Yeah.
You're just like, wow,
Right. Right.
at that age.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we do the best we can.
We do, but that is her truth, and I'm so willing to accept that I did that and
Yeah.
apologize for it, and we get to move on, right?
Yes.
Same thing, with my husband. It's just understanding, having your emotional intelligence, and understanding what it can do in your life when you're willing to really sit with it. I
Yes.
mean, I tell my husband, some people might say this is sexy about my husband, or this is when my husband is vulnerable. Oh my goodness, it's just you get to see that side of them and you realize that you're both in it together and I'm trying to work on me, you're trying to work on
Yeah.
you, and together we show up differently
Well,
as opposed to trying to fix.
and that's the difference though, right? You both have to be trying to work on
Mhm.
yourselves as opposed to trying to work on each other. And what advice how did you find yourself and your husband there? Let's get on that. Like how did you guys find yourself in that same place of wanting to work on yourselves and seeing that as the answer, right? Working on yourselves and not trying to fix each other.
Right. I think, my mom passed away in 2017, and that's where 2018 I started dabbling a little bit more into emotional intelligence and understanding my own process. 2019 was when I really went deep. Um,
And I do have to make a correlation
sure.
that not drinking and the being able to go deep,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
you can't be partying and going deep. Like they just
Yes.
don't go together.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, I think, like I said, I know I have friends that do drink and are
Mhm.
doing the work, and I'm so proud of them. For me, the clarity was just at a
Yeah.
whole different
Well, there's a
level.
balance
Right.
for sure, but
Right.
obviously you knew that you didn't have the balance.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I did
Yeah.
not.
My
I did
son
not.
doesn't have the balance.
Yeah.
There's just some people that don't have the
Right,
balance.
right, and, I think so being sober definitely allowed me to start doing the work.
Mhm.
My husband, also hasn't he stopped drinking 2000 gosh, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't
Mhm.
remember, but it was
Yeah.
6 years prior to me not drinking. But so I started doing the work, and I think that he started noticing the changes in myself. Uh, we have this saying, "Do you want to be right or you want to be happy?" And we agree to disagree. Before it was almost, I feel like because of my divorce, I was always on the defensive and I always
Mhm.
had to defend every situation. And I had to kind of prove my point. And I was going to explain every which way possible for him to understand and vice versa with him. Um, I think I had to become okay with we can be different. We're individuals. We can have
Mhm.
different opinions. I'm a woman, he's a man. We just already are wired differently,
Yes.
and that's okay.
Yes.
But when we support each other, even if we don't agree with how we're viewing
Mhm.
things, and we're willing to grow together, I think that's where it happened. So I started with my work back then in 2019. He started seeing the difference. I would say that it was about two. 2022, 2021, 22, where because he saw the difference, he started
Yeah.
asking questions. And he started, trying to figure out my breath work, my meditation, my
Mhm.
morning ritual with prayer and, sitting in a quiet space and journaling and all that good stuff. He also put himself through a program to kind of figure out emotional intelligence as well. And when that happened, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm just so grateful. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. I'm not,
Well, you're on the same
yeah,
page
yeah,
now.
yeah.
You understand each other. You speak a different language. You're both emotionally intelligent
Yes, yes,
because you don't have to explain. You just understand. Like you said, you can agree to disagree.
yeah. So I think that, he started trying to figure out things for himself
Mhm.
based on kind of seeing me shift. Things that used to knock me off the horse and, where he would trigger me, all of a sudden didn't trigger me.
Mm.
And
You just weren't giving it power
I
anymore.
wasn't I wasn't giving it power anymore, but I think I was so deeply rooted in the faith that I had in myself, in the faith that I had in us, where
You didn't have to give it power
I didn't
anymore.
have to, and I learned to pick and choose my battles.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the things that I gave importance to were not important. And I started remembering how when my mom was sick and living with us before she passed, he'd watch her. Or I had a lady that would come in and watch her for a couple hours, so I could go into the office and see clients. And sometimes I'd show up at home, and he would be spoon feeding her, and they'd be cracking up. Or if
Mm.
she'd have a fall, like he'd come in and help me. He'd come in and help me kind of get her ready for her baths. Um, it, I started remembering that,
Yeah.
and I started thinking about why, as women, do we nitpick at certain things when again, my friend would tell me all the time, he's an excellent man. He's amazing for just doing that. Because how many people don't like their mother-in-laws who are well and healthy, let alone
Yeah,
here
yeah,
he
taking
is.
care of
Yeah,
her. I mean, he
sleepless
didn't have to
nights,
do that. Yeah.
where she would wake up in pain or different things would happen, and he had to work early in the morning, and he totally supported me in it,
Mhm.
right? So I started remembering how he's shown up for me as a husband, and the
Mhm.
other things didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
The other things didn't matter anymore. And little things that would trigger him, he started noticing were no longer important. And he started relating that to his upbringing and things that he had to deal with and past traumas. And
Mhm.
now,
That we all
yep,
have,
yep,
right? It's like nobody if you have to dig. If
right,
you ever want to lead a fulfilled life, you
right,
have to dig into your past as ugly and
yes,
as unhappy
right,
and you just got to feel it and if we talked about it, right? You got to feel to heal
yes,
and move on.
yes,
But that's the only way we can fully move on.
right,
And like I said, that's why I started this. I need people to know that like it's okay.
yeah, yeah,
And then eventually it does, right? It just becomes a story
right,
with no emotional baggage.
right. It's that whole idea of what I had mentioned to you of how I wake up in the morning with the idea of walk into the fire.
Yeah.
Whatever is coming, walk into it, feel it, deal with it, and find a lesson out of it, grow
Mhm.
from it, as opposed to again being in victim mentality.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing is that so many of us live in that space for
Mhm.
so long, we don't know how to get out of it.
Well, we just went to Joe Dispenza,
Yes,
and if you guys have to check him out if you haven't, I've said his name a million times, I think, but, being in that space, you have to be in the space, you have to want it, you have to look for it.
yes,
We have to just believe that we are powerful and that we're not
right.
victims and step into our power.
Right, it's
And like,
easier not to feel it. Which
mhm.
again, the drinking, right? It
But
was easier to numb. It's easier not to feel it
mhm.
and face
And it's
it.
comfortable. And like our body gets used to the comfort, like he
Yes.
says.
Yes.
It just becomes our personality.
Routine, habit,
Mhm.
it's almost like we surrender to whatever that is as opposed to surrendering to our
Yep.
emotions and processing them. Once you learn how to do that and
Mhm.
command that, oh gosh, it's a whole different life. Like you can't even imagine that your life can be this
Yeah.
amazing and so aligned with your purpose
Mhm.
because I think that's a big thing for me is I've made it a big part of my routine or my practice that I will have a crying session. I'll have a crying session. I will, what I call, make space.
Yes.
I will make
Yes.
space because if I'm holding on to something heavy
Mhm.
and I'm not processing that, then I don't have the bandwidth to show up in life the way I
Yeah.
need to show up in life. I
You
don't
don't have the bandwidth to step into the fire.
that, yes, to be there for my children
Mhm.
when they come to me, to when my husband has something going on that it's going to trigger me because I didn't process those other emotions that don't belong to him.
Yep.
They belong to me. And I think that we all owe that to ourselves.
Well, it's just like Joe says, your personal reality becomes your personality. So
Absolutely.
if we always believe our life is shit, then we're going to attract shit.
Yep.
And if we get ready to step into the fire and know our power, then we're going to be ready to take on whatever the day brings with confidence.
Absolutely. Or how he says vice versa, or your personality becomes your personal reality.
Mhm.
If we're showing up to life in a big way, not making ourselves small for others,
Mhm.
not shrinking ourselves, owing our radiance, our magnetism, then we're going to be somebody that everybody wants to be around.
So what was the final push when you said, "Okay, I'm freaking doing it"? Cuz you got a lot of pushes, but what
Yes.
was the final?
Yes. So it's funny because I was in a container called the Queendom Lab with a group of women. It was amazing, and through that, the in 2023, I had sat at the dinner table at Thanksgiving. We always go around and say, "This is what my goal is for
Mm,
next year. This
okay.
is what I'd like to do. I'm grateful for this, but this is what I would like to do." We don't wait till New Year's to do that. Like we
Right.
we put it out there on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And when it came around to my turn, I said, "Okay, I'm doing this in front of the kids and my in-laws and my husband. I'm going to say that I'm putting this book out."
Yeah.
Like there's no going back at this point. And I'm big on, if I say something to the kids or the grandkids,
Mhm.
like now it's, sink or
Solidified.
swim
Mhm.
because you don't want to let them down. You
Mhm.
might let yourself down. It's easier to let yourself down
Yeah.
and not follow through. But since I put it out there, it was heavier on my heart, like, "You gotta get it done this year." And
Mhm.
then when I was in that container, we had to come up with 3 major commitments to ourselves. And I said, "All right." My book was one of them. I had another 2, but my book was one of them. And I wanna say about a month and a half, 2 months before Thanksgiving, I thought, "Oh my goodness, like, it's coming. You need to." I had already written it. It was
Okay.
already
I was
there.
like, "Wait a
Yeah,
minute."
no, it was already written. It was already there. I hadn't finalized with the illustrator,
Okay.
so there was a few little things that I needed to get done. But I got to come back to the Thanksgiving table and show them my sketches and the book.
Okay.
And I said, it's so funny because my husband was like, "You did what?" And I go, "Do you not remember that I said I was going to do this?" And he said, "Well, yeah, but I just thought like it was something you put out." It's so funny because when we create that self doubt in
Yes.
ourselves, like we're almost like it's almost like radiating to everybody else, right? Like,
Yes.
she's just saying she's gonna do this, but she's not gonna do it, type of thing. So when I presented it, the everybody was just like, "Okay, that's great, mom. Congratulations." The kids are all excited to see themselves on the
Yeah.
cover, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Um, so I think that's what it was. I think it was, and that was another reality that I had. Like, why are we willing to do something when others hold us accountable?
Oh, all the time.
Yep, and that's why the word conviction stood out to me because I'm done doing things just because I don't want to let others down. How about
Mhm.
myself? Why am I
Mhm.
giving myself that
Mhm.
importance of not letting myself down?
Yeah.
So it's that sense of like I'm worthy. I am radiant. I have this gift in me and
Yes.
I'm the only one that's standing in
You
my
just
own
gave me
way.
the chills, Lucy. I love it. Now you know why I hang out with people like her. See? Because it's true. We have to realize like we are worthy and we can step into our greatness and we don't need people to make us do it. But I know exactly what you're saying. That's why I put stuff on social media
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, everybody's watching me now. I've got to do it. But we also need to do whatever works for us,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because we have to keep pushing ourselves and we have to keep trying and we have to keep failing
Yes.
because it's the only way we're gonna grow and to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Right. Right. I
And
think
that's the biggest thing with people, right? I'm sure that you've experienced they're afraid to
right.
fail.
Right. I think it's also important that we give ourselves that space of, you're in real estate, I'm in lending. being that I've been in the business for so long, it's that I know that I was in my masculine for a long time.
Oh,
Being a single mom, being in a business where I was surrounded by men, and
and very competitive.
yes, very competitive,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I have learned that my strength is in my softness.
Mm,
It's not in being so hard all the time.
mhm.
And there are days where, I'm pretty disciplined about getting up, doing my workout, doing my morning meditation, like I mentioned
Mhm.
to you, the morning routine, right? But there might be a morning where I think to myself, today feels heavy. I don't need to into the office. Where before it was like, you need to be in the office by this time, you need to be
Mm.
on the phones by this time. No, I don't have to.
Yeah.
And I think it's also that giving ourselves that grace to be soft,
Yes.
and just
And to stay a woman.
yes.
And like you said, to
Yes.
bring what our true power is, empathy, love, heart,
Right.
and to hopefully change a few men on the way because we're mothers and we're grandmothers and we're allowing our young men to feel and
Yes.
our young men to speak up. And so, we did have that conversation as well, your granddaughters. How us as Latinas, right? And just kids in general in a lot of families, not mine, obviously. I was able to say whatever the hell I wanted. There's no holding me back
Yeah.
ever.
Good thing.
But in a lot of families, I realized that it was an issue. Like kids are seen, they're not heard, right? And you wanted it to be very different for your granddaughters growing up.
Yes. Yes. That was a major thing for me in my work during the process of transformation. I went to Catholic school. I was a sheltered child, and it's not, saying anything negative about my parents. They
Mhm.
did the best that they could.
They
And,
always do right.
private schools is not cheap,
Mhm.
so I know that it took sacrifice. So I'm not saying anything negative in regards to that. But I feel that sometimes we protect our children so much that it backfires.
Mm.
And we're not allowing them to see the world and to experience growth on their own, and we shut them down. So
Yeah.
I feel a lot of times, or in my situation, I should say, whenever I had an opinion, it wasn't an opinion, it was considered talking back.
Mm.
So I didn't have a voice in a lot of situations. I found that I did that to my daughter too. That unfortunately, when she had something that she needed to say, that I was mimicking the way that I was brought up because I thought that was the right way, where it's not an opinion, you're talking back. And, that's probably one of the hardest things that I've had to process, was doing that to my
I
daughter.
think I did that too.
Yeah. And sitting with
Mhm.
that, like I've shed many tears with my daughter because I feel like there were instances where she didn't show up for herself or speak up for herself uh, in different scenarios. And I had to process that I did that to her, and then
Mhm.
when she got old enough, um,
Isn't that It's great. I do that often.
yeah,
I mean, not a lot, right? Because we can't live in guilt and but
right.
recognizing like, "Oh, my poor baby, he
Yes.
didn't have a chance."
Yeah, and I have forgiven myself for that aspect of things. Her and I have had some deep conversations about it. We joke around about a time when she had an issue with somebody at school, and I was like, "You're gonna go over there and you're gonna meet her in her front yard and you're gonna handle business." And because I felt so bad that she was just not using her voice to defend herself.
Mm,
And at that point, I had already started finding my voice because I was divorced, and now it was like this dragon was coming out of me.
mm.
Um, but it was already unfortunately too late for me to change that about her because it was so embedded. Now she has it.
It's
She
funny
totally has
because,
it.
I kind of feel like it's a superhero, right? Who just finds his power, but you still don't know how to control it yet.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're out of control with your powers. And so with her, once she found her voice, I sit back and I'm in awe of her.
Mm,
Where she's just like, "Hey mom, I'm don't be upset with me. I went on this protest." And I'm like, "I'm not upset with you. Use your voice." Like,
mhm,
I also protested when, the whole Rodney King thing happened and I was in
mhm.
high school. Like, she's like, "You did?" And it's those stories, it's those truths that unfortunately we keep quiet as parents, and our children don't know those things about
Mm.
us. So they don't realize how alike we are.
Yes. That's
But
why there was such a divide.
yes.
You always think, "What do they know? They don't know anything. They're so old. They're like
Yes.
frickin' 30." Like,
Yes.
it's like, no. And
Yes.
then you become 30 and you realize nothing has changed.
Yes.
I mean, now with social media and stuff, but really, if you're in it, it's still the same stuff. It's just done differently,
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, going back to my granddaughters and just my lineage, that the thing is that I want, the book also has a big part of it that I wanted to honor my grandmother
Mhm.
and my great grandmothers who I don't know much about.
Mhm.
But because of this work, I've been digging so much deeper. And
Yeah.
I'm talking, I am getting stories from my aunts, that I just found out a week ago that my mom lived in Mexico City for 3 years. I had no idea.
It's really beautiful when you start searching and through 23andMe. My grandfather that we never met, he passed when my mom was 13. We met his whole side of the family. Like, we're Facebook friends now with my cousins that we would have never met.
Yes.
And but it's they talk about generational curses, right? And I mean, it's not so much a curse, but it kind of is because it is passed down,
Right.
the negative, whatever it is. And I'm sure that's what they were speaking of, right? The secrets
Yes.
and how
Yes.
those secrets, they do become a curse because they become a poison in a family.
Right, right, they weigh us down, and
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing is that I think I've gotten to the point where it's honoring my lineage
Mhm.
100%, more the responsibility to the women
Mhm.
in our lineage,
Mm.
and also honoring our truth. Like, just honoring whatever truth I have, that it doesn't make me any less, it doesn't make me any more than anybody else.
Mhm.
It's my truth. I
Mhm.
need to process it,
Mhm.
and by working through all that and being honest with my kids and my grandkids, my granddaughters especially, they have a voice. I see my
Yes.
granddaughters and they're just, they're amazing. Like they are one of them is sassy, one of them has the most beautiful heart, where you think like, okay, this is, she's going to be the one that,
It's gonna make
yeah,
change.
that she's, there's one that I might have to step in a little bit. I think to
Mhm.
myself, but no, it's like those old patterns try to come back and it's like, no, she's got this.
Mhm.
She has a village around her that's teaching her and that's allowing her to be her own person, and
Just like
we'll
kinda
surround her.
a little bit.
Yes, right? And a little bit. But yeah, that's a big, big, that's a major part of why I am who I am right now, because I have a sense of
Mm.
responsibility. Being that I'm 50, there's a sense of urgency to do the work for my lineage because I
I
don't
think
know.
that's what it is about
Yeah.
50. Like, we realize, okay, you're a half a century. I mean, how old are you really gonna live? Maybe 105? I
Yes.
don't
Yes.
know, how it's like, but like you said, we don't know. We can maybe think we're gonna live to
Yes.
105, but we could be gone tomorrow.
Right.
So we realize that the clock is ticking a little faster, and we do need, if we want to be world changers, and I know you do,
Yes.
and that starts with our lineage, right? Like they say, charity starts at home,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's with our kids and our grandkids
Mhm.
and who they're going to be. And it's really funny, real estate changed my life, Lucy,
Mm.
because it did teach me all the empowerment things, and then I was able to take that home to my son, and that's how he left his company and started his own business because he didn't like the way they were doing things.
Right.
But I was strong enough to say, well, you have the opportunity, start your own business.
Right.
So what was it? What was I know it was your sister and those things, but as far as the beginning of your healing, where did you go? Like, where did you search? How did you start that journey?
I went to an event in Ontario. It was called the Delta. It was a little, I don't know if you had part in it, but
How did you find it?
so I found it because of my circle. I found it because of my
Okay.
circle.
And your circle was from work
My
or from
circle,
service or
so yeah, my circle was from work, people that were already doing the work, and like I said, Annabelle was a big part of it. She was
Mhm.
at that event. There was her and then another woman by the name of Yvonne de la Flor, who I did coaching with. I think you remember Yvonne. I had her on one of our calls, but
Mm.
she actually helped me to start working on some stuff along with Annabelle and going deep. Like, I didn't understand. You hear do the work, go
Yeah.
deep, and you're just like, okay, and I turned into one of those people that for a bit what seemed a little strange to me,
Ooh, the
because
woohoo
the
people.
woohoo, right? You think like, what is this? What's happening?
We all think they're woohoo till we're woohoo.
Right? And I also feel like a really good that's also a really good perspective to touch on right now is I wasn't looking into it so much
Mhm.
because I was brought up in such a religious home that for a minute it seemed like, am I going
Oh, I
against
love that you touch on
yes, am
that.
I going against what my parents wanted me
Especially
to
Catholicism. I love
absolutely.
my I love
Yes.
I like you, right? I love my foundation.
Yes.
I understand it's an amazing foundation, that foundation in God, but ooh, Catholicism could really screw you up when you
Oh,
start searching
I mean,
and
yeah.
yeah,
That was a lot of stuff that a lot of the work that I had to do was
breaking away from the
shame-based and guilt-based because of what I thought I was doing wrong, which it's no,
mm,
God created me at perfectly at his in his image.
mhm,
And I think when you realize that, like my connection with God right now is the deepest that it has ever been. I
yep,
would say that I'm so connected with God that blind faith, like I just have such faith that everything around me is going to work
yeah,
for my well being.
yeah,
And there's no doubt for me. And I think that before it was like, if I take this misstep, I'm going to be punished, you know? And
mhm.
so it's like this whole thing of,
Now you know your relationship is with God
oh,
only. He
100%,
is your father. He is the
100%.
only person who can judge you, who
Yes.
can yeah, who and he won't
Yes.
because he's given us free will.
Right.
And I believe he wants us to search
Yes.
because he wants us to be with him wholeheartedly.
And we've lived this life, we've had this path because that's what has been laid before us. That's already
Mhm.
part of the plan.
Mhm.
But I think that aspect of it, I really wondered if I was doing the wrong thing
Mhm.
by going deeper into the work, the meditation, the breath work, all these things where it's like,
Yoga. All the things they
yeah,
say,
yeah,
huh?
yeah,
You're
right?
just like, what
Yeah.
the
And
heck?
I feel like breath work, I mean, that in itself has changed. I feel like I have such a clear I say this all the time. I have such a clear reception. The
Mhm.
connection is so clear
Mhm.
when it comes to my conversations with God. And they're on my terms.
Mhm.
They're on my terms. I
Mhm.
don't care what somebody says I should or should not be doing. I know that God is with me, God is within me, and I don't have to prove anything to anybody
Right.
otherwise.
Lucy, it was so funny. So after Joe Dispenza weekend, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna go meditate. And I'm like, I'm gonna go be with God. I'm not kidding. I felt like I was going on a hot date. Like ah. But yeah, that's how
There's an
it
excitement.
becomes. There's an excitement
Yeah.
and just to be alone
Yes.
and
Yes.
silence,
Yeah.
just kind of waiting
Yeah.
to maybe hear something.
Right. I think after Joe Dispenza, it's funny because I think a lot of us had the same thought process of wanting to come home and kind of refine our practice, right? I went
Mhm.
out to my garden, I cleaned out whatever needed to be cleaned out. I, fixed my space. I have my little incense holder and I pray my way. I sit
Mhm.
with God the way I need to sit every morning. And there was just this excitement in the air, right? And it
Yeah.
continues. I've been
Yes.
doing my meditation every single morning.
Yes.
I have a great group of women that I attended with who were all holding ourselves accountable. But even if we weren't, that's what
Mhm.
I'm saying is that the conviction is so embedded in me.
Yeah.
And I know that I need this to have my connection with God so that I can
Mhm.
start my day and show up in the world the way that I need to
Yeah.
show up, even if there's turbulence.
Yes. Well, and it's like he said, if you know you can change your life by meditating every day, why wouldn't you do it?
Right,
And it is true.
right.
And regardless of what anybody says, I mean, the brain scans are there, right? It makes a difference. It's in the science. There is
Yes.
science to prove that it changes our brain,
Yeah.
our body chemistry. So if we know we have that power, why wouldn't we do it? And I think people get confused, right? It's called a practice.
Mhm.
Kobe was the best basketball player, but he still practiced every day.
Right.
We have to show up and we have to practice every day in anything we do if we want to see real
Right.
change.
It's our refinement. We
Mhm.
have to refine ourselves and how we want to show up in this world, and that to me is a big part of it. Honestly, that if I can sit with myself and really process what's going on in my world, talking to God, whatever it needs to be, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just me being quiet and shutting everything out completely. Sometimes it's a full on conversation with
Yeah.
God. Sometimes it's a conversation with myself as far as what needs to be done, but allowing ourselves a space for clarity.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's, it's just such a beautiful thing when we give
Yeah.
ourselves the space and the time. We're all so busy. Everybody's so busy and always running around. And we're just in a rush to now go get in traffic, to go, but when you start from that place, it's
Mhm.
almost like Yeah, the traffic's there. That's just a small part of what my world is, but
Yeah.
I'm here in my car, like this morning when you and I were kind of going back and forth texting with each other. Yeah, there was a little bit of traffic, but I get to be in the presence of my
Mm.
music, in the presence of my thoughts.
So it's a gratitude.
Yes.
Even just sitting in gratitude,
Mhm.
realizing what we have as opposed to what we don't. And
Right.
that's what most victims do, right? And I realize most alcoholics,
Yeah.
most drug addicts, well, they have a good victim story,
Oh gosh, yeah.
and they will tell you over and over and over again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we have to find our own empowerment
Right.
story.
Right.
And that's what you're doing with your book.
Yeah.
You're teaching your grandkids how to empower themselves by finding their voice and speaking their truth. And I love that,
Thank
Lucy.
you. Thank
So,
you.
what's the next book about?
So the next one is called Mommy's Magic Bottle. And it is a children's book for mommies, is what I like to say. So it's a
Okay.
child's perspective of how mommy is showing up in the world
Ooh.
and them wondering what that day is going to bring, how she's going to show up. And it has to do with uh, a parent being in grief, addiction, or depression.
Ooh.
So I'm very excited for that one. That's actually, I wrote that one first.
Okay.
But I didn't think that should have been birthed into the world first. I thought
Okay.
it should be a little bit more lighthearted
Yeah.
first, which is the reason this one came about. But the second book, I just feel like it is almost like a testament or a testimony to that mom that goes through a loss, that
Mm.
goes through the divorce, that goes through the depression, that they don't know how to get out of it, that
Mm-hmm.
goes through going to the alcohol or an addiction. Um, And us being so lost in that
Mm-hmm.
grief or whatever the emotion
Mm-hmm.
is that our children get put on the back burner. And
That hits home.
yeah,
That's really sad.
and I think
But
I
I'm excited because it's needed.
I think it'll reach a lot of women. I think that, me wanting to write these books with the emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
piece, it it's something we're missing. It's something that's
You know
taboo.
what we're missing? And you're right. And but also in is at a child's perspective.
Right.
That's what I love about it because as adults, right, all these self-help books and all these things, they're so long, they're so big, there's so much in there. Not that they're not wonderful. I've read tons of them. But I mean, sometimes you just need a freaking simple like paragraph. The page 11 could be like a morning affirmation,
Right.
and
Right.
sometimes that's all we need. And that's the thing that's going to trigger somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this book is actually going to be a hardcover, the one that's coming, and it's going to contain a journal at the end of it, so that we can write children or
Mm,
letters or journal that day, so that our children can have that one day to understand what we were going through in that moment.
I love that.
And I think that sometimes we think to ourselves that our children are too small and they don't understand, or that they
I tell everybody that. Our
yes.
kids are freaking smart and they see everything. And with social media, there's nothing that they really don't know. They need to hear it from us now.
Right, right. I just feel like our children can see us as safe spaces.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of times we freely speak or we have discussions that we shouldn't have in front of them, or we don't validate them as little adults because eventually they are going to remember
Mhm.
what occurred. But we don't validate them as people, and we don't think that they deserve those explanations or conversations.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the intention behind that book is, like I said, a children's book for mommies,
Mhm.
because to maybe read something that your child might be feeling, but you haven't taken initiative to have a little conversation with that
Mhm.
young child.
Or didn't know how to start.
Absolutely. Or not having the emotional intelligence to
Mhm.
know how
And
to have that
it'll
conversation,
help, yeah,
right?
start, yeah,
So
conversation.
I feel like it can help a lot of healing with the moms, with the parents, with the children, and for a child to be validated a lot younger than it took me to figure it out with my
You
children.
know, I didn't know what your next book was about, but it's really interesting because we just started a support group for families of addicts at the church.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
because the families need somewhere to go. They need somebody to talk to because the person that is in the addiction isn't emotionally available.
Yeah. People think you hear addiction and you think drugs and alcohol. It could be overeating, it can be
Yeah,
over
anything.
exercising, it can be
Work.
workaholic, it can
Mhm.
be so many different things. And, the alcohol aspect of it, I didn't realize that it was a situation for me when it was happening because you go to a baptism, you go to a first birthday
Oh my
party, you
gosh,
go
girl, you're
in our
Mexican.
culture, so
Yeah.
it becomes a norm.
Mhm.
And I think that it was important for me to create this book because where, granted, it wasn't that heavy for me when I was younger.
Mhm.
It became more of an issue as I got older with the
Your children.
losses, right? Um, but I think that once it's addressed, it's almost like it does trigger. I have people that have come up to me after sharing my story with certain people and where they'll say, "Yeah, you know what? I might actually, you're not we don't label ourselves as
Right.
alcoholic or that we have a
Mhm.
problem because it's like every party, like I said, you go to a baby shower and the guest of
Mhm.
honor can't even
Look,
drink.
that's
It's expected to have alcohol.
the hardest part for my son when he stopped drinking. It's like, how do you stop drinking when every family party there's alcohol?
Right, right.
So I get it. I hate to wrap up, but we have to, Lucy.
Good.
When does that book come out?
So that one we have a few months
Okay.
ahead of us. I think it's going to be released probably the summer of this year, 2025.
All right.
So
And
that's what
do
we
we
shoot
have
for.
there's her Instagram, Lucy on Purpose. So they can find you on Instagram and then you'll let us know when the book is being released, right?
Yes,
So we
I will
can
announce it.
purchase
I
it.
will announce it. I have a book
And you can
signing
find
coming up for this book
yay,
in
when
April, so I'll go ahead and announce that
post
as
that
well.
as well. All right, and you can find Abuelita's Heart Wisdom on Amazon. So go buy it, you guys. And thank you so much, Lucy. Any
Yes,
last
thank you.
I would like you to give anybody advice who's maybe in a position of not knowing where to start to just, start opening their heart to maybe some finding a group or somewhere to look to find help or to find yeah.
Yeah, first I think that you need to figure out who your sphere is. I think you need to figure out who your tribe is because when you make that decision to stop drinking or doing certain things, people will fall off and you'll start realizing who your tribe is and you'll
Mhm.
start realizing who really wants you to be okay. But there are definitely organizations out there that can support you. There are, obviously there's groups like AA, there's groups like Al Anon, there's different organizations that you can go to when it comes to that. And yeah, I mean, if you want to reach out, I also have other resources when it comes to doing the work, going a little bit deeper and really wanting to cultivate a new life for yourself based on stepping into the fire.
Yeah. Let's go, guys. Step into the fire. Thank you,
Thank you
Lucy.
for having me.
Bye.